Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first conversation with Lucas and Brittany Chiang about Don't Forget the Human, a tech talk conversation where we explore what it means to build tech with a focus on teams, team cultures, and resources those teams have to actually create amazing products. I'm Brittany Chiang. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Flatter Incorporated, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. We're kicking off a conversation by simply sharing some of the projects we're working on and how we're taking them on with our teams and cultures. Lucas, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Just lots of things are changing really quickly and we're just trying to, implement technology where it makes sense and where we can, get the best outputs pretty much.
Absolutely. You've always been a fan of technology. You want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in tech?
Sure. Um, in I guess like lots of young men, boys, teenagers, I was really, into the video game industry and exploring that, like just on the entertainment side when I was a kid, and actually went to Rochester Institute of Technology to pursue, developing games there. The reason I wanted to go there was because it was one of the few places that had that degree of like game development. And since then, I've kind of gotten more into web application development. Not quite as exciting, but the same kind of skill sets and problem solving involved and stuff. But yeah, that's a bit about my background.
Awesome. Very impressive. How do you like RIT?
Oh, I loved it. I met some of my best friends, lots of good people. I loved just like that immersion in that nerdy culture pretty much. It was right up my alley.
Definitely. I think that's a culture we're trying to pour some gasoline on at Flatter Inc. and just pull up some of the tech nerds and start developing some capability, right?
hmm
So what are you guys working on?
so the big project that we're taking on internally, it's a tool that helps people practice their coaching reps or hours. So if I'm a coach in training, I want to be able to practice my discipline by, pairing up with people that might want coaching or even other coaches, that are also practicing so we can kind of exchange our hours and gain skills that way. This tool kind of takes out the other human. So here you're kind of going against an AI, talking to an AI persona. Um, the reason that it kind of maintains some semblance of like, okay, I'm talking to a real person. We have these case studies that, JR, our chief learning officer, has put together over the years, that we've actually, been training these coaches on directly, but usually it's in the form of like role playing, like I'm going to be a case study and you can be the coach, and we practice that way. This is just another way to get these coaching repetition hours. I don't, if you have another way to explain that, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm an AF certified ACC coach and I still get nervous role playing in front of an audience. So, especially if you haven't been coaching for a while, I could see personally using it to get a little bit comfortable with coaching before I go into a mentor coaching session, which is required every 3 years, or, before going into a new coaching relationship with someone, just to kind of role play the introductory, hey, this is what coaching is. I mean, I can see a lot of different use cases for coaching in addition to just the foundational coach education that has to happen when you're learning how to coach for the first time.
Yeah, and I've heard also like the analogy about like learning another language. Like the biggest barrier is, finding somebody to speak with, and then also your own kind of like an ego thing where it's like, okay, I feel embarrassed because I'm not able to articulate myself, and you've been speaking your native language your whole life, so you know all the tricks and you know how to access that information really quickly. Taking that like barrier, okay, I don't have to worry about talking to another person necessarily. Um, and just, yeah, like any other skill, like if I'm going to learn how to drive, I'm going to do it in a safe way, and then I'm going to go on the highway. I'm not going to go straight, to something that could be, higher stakes in a way.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the technology stack and how we're developing this, and maybe even how that process is different than what it would have looked like even 6 months ago.
Yeah, so yeah, just like we're looking at how AI can help like coaches train, same approach with like looking at a development project. So how can we use AI to help us plan the project and even write most or all of the code? Um, in the past, like when these tools first started popping up, like ChatGPT, particularly Copilot, there was like a degree of like, okay, I can ask it questions about code and it can help me write the code that I'm already starting on, and I can take the code and copy and paste it and kind of um, that was more of like an AI augmented approach, but now we've got things where you could point the AI to a particular folder and say like, look at the entire project now, add features, add pages, revise things. So it's a lot more like, instead of just augmenting my own skills, I'm kind of supervising the AI when it's doing what I kind of direct it to do.
Supervising AI. That's a new term, huh? I'm looking to also implement kind of a similar approach in our business development department where I'm hoping, by the end of this month or next month that we will have opportunities delivered to my desk that are already qualified, bypassing the identification phase of business development, which takes a lot of time, top of the funnel as a federal contractor, to whittle it down to those opportunities that are a perfect fit for us. Um, and then just kind of taking that and then, like you said, supervising. So then, okay, did it choose good ones? Did it not? Do I have to adjust the AI employee a little bit and give them some better instructions so they do better next time? Um, but even just that workflow of having that assistance is a huge force multiplier, and it's been really neat to see.
Yeah. And like, I guess like you kind of quickly, like you use an AI tool, you say like, write me an essay or something. Then you're like barrier for like, okay, now that I can write an essay instantaneously, like now I'm not worried about like getting 5 pages together. I'm more worried about like the artistry of it, or I'm more worried about the emotions that I'm conveying, or what am I now able to pay attention to that I wasn't, necessarily before.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, I think I've gotten a little bit of, I call it AI ADD, where there's so many things I want to do because I have these tools at my fingertip that I have trouble kind of focusing in on what exactly I want to do. Like maybe I intended on writing an article, but my mind gets carried away and thinks I could turn this into a book. I could illustrate it, like you said, with the art. I could have some user engagement, some interactivity with the article. So, by the end of my 1 hour working session, I've diverged from the article and I'm doing five other things. So, how do you stay focused with all the capability that you have at your fingertips?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, like I have the same problems, like, like especially you can apply it to creativity and everything. And yeah, it's just like analysis paralysis. There's so many possibilities. On the professional side, I want to look at like how are we doing it before we had this automation, and how did that, did it help us or did it hurt us? So like particularly looking at agile, like if you're kind of if your barrier for like what a requirement is really low, then you kind of run into like these things where, oh, you're chasing this, now you're chasing this. And um but using agile like to say, okay, like we can bring in like requirements, but we're not necessarily going to work on them until they, reach a certain threshold, or they get presented to the right stakeholders, and kind of emphasizing like why instead of like the how is figured out, like the how is going to be like heavy amounts of automation. Um, So I guess, yeah, the answer is looking at agile for me.
Yeah, another balance I'm trying to strike is using the technologies we have, vice researching additional new technologies, because there's so many AI companies just popping up left and right. And I've been, since day one using GP and really enjoyed that. There's Copilot. I was just introduced to a tool called Notebook LM, which is free through Google. And it's really interesting to me also the interplay between the different softwares and what their strengths are and things like that. And, just this week, my little sister-in-law has been accepted to 3 universities. She's very blessed, VA, Virginia Tech, and William and Mary. And she has no idea where she wants to go. So I had GPT do a deep research on the topic, careers, degrees, what the strengths are, what the campuses are like, and it spits out 15 pages worth of text, which is great. But even I didn't want to read that. So then my friend had told me about Notebook LM, which takes PDF documents and turns them into a podcast. So, within the span of 30 minutes, I generated the deep research, uploaded it to Notebook LM, never having used it before, not knowing how to use it and all that. And the learning curve is low enough that, by the end of 30 minutes, I have a full podcast customized for my sister-in-law that I could text to her, and she could consume that information in an easy way. I think it created a 28-minute podcast, so that was pretty neat. So went a little on a goose chase, but I was pretty satisfied with the outcome. So what's learning been looking like for you in this area?
Yeah, I mean, going back to like, supervising the AI and trying to get better at that, like I think at the beginning it was a lot of like kind of like turn my brain off and be naive and say like, oh, give me like a finished product. Okay, that doesn't work that well, right? Because then there's all these decisions being made in the background. Something that works a little bit better is, give me part of a solution, give me part of a solution, and like so on. Um, but then, like, I've also run into issues with that. So, like, nowadays, I'm looking more like, and we've done this on the writing side too, if you want to speak on that after this, but we kind of take a step back and say, like, what's the entire problem? Like, how would we have approached this without AI? Look at, the mental model so that like, okay, when I get an output, I'm going to understand how it fits together with the rest of the things instead of going piece by piece by piece, but looking at the big picture and trying to nail that down. And that can even be like AI assisted, like let's just like talk to AI and come up with a plan before I say like, okay, code this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something we've been taught way back when of like good requirements begin with an on paper process that works. And, even Windows was modeled after the analog of having a desk and file folders and things like that. Um, and I think we're kind of losing the bubble on what is the analog analogy, right? Some of the things we're building don't even exist in the non-technical world, um, which has been interesting. I think the younger generations who have grown up on mobile and, with tech kind of augmenting their analog experiences all day long. It's the whole native technologist is much different in 2025 than it was in 2008 or so when we were in high school and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I can see things like where it might end up, but it's like all speculative. But it's kind of like, we're talking to this like sage in the cave in the woods, and it's like, like we're not really sure like, where it's coming up with this knowledge, and we're just kind of like trying to interact with it. And like if you had somebody that's like this expert, like that can do anything, how would you want them to like help like add value to your life? Like, would you want, oh, I'm gonna type and then like send it to them and then they're gonna respond, or do I want to talk directly to them? Or, there's all these different like ideas of like how do you extract like this value from this like really kind of unfamiliar technology. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, it's not like It's not like a book or it's not like a typewriter. It's kind of a new thing.
Right. It's absolutely new. And what I like about it is I think it does encourage creativity. I think since I was introduced to my friend GPT, I have been a lot more creative. My mind kind of wanders. I have ideas. I can lay hands on them really quickly and see a work product, which is exciting. So I'm very energized by all this change. And I want to emphasize the human experience and how humans are engaging with it. Um, so, I mean, one of the things that really excites me is the ability to customize, and I could have GPT deliver something to me however I want it. I can have it written in poetry. I can have it translated into a podcast. I can make a storyboard, a visual storyboard if I'm a visual learner. um, I love the customization aspect of just being able to consume and share data in ways that are pleasing to, the recipient, the customer, the employee, the leader. I just think there's so many opportunities to improve the workforce enjoyment of engaging with information systems.
Yeah, and like this is something, that we were working on in just like a fun way, but like I think it is relevant here, like this Star Wars like project management ChatGPT where like depending on what you're interested in, and I love Star Wars, so taking something like that you have a passion for on just like the fun side and trying to apply that to like, oh, use Star Wars metaphors or like this language to help with project management. Like, how can we, add these layers on top of like kind of like, I mean, work can be mundane sometimes, it can be boring. Like, how do you add some of this excitement? And it's kind of like what you would do if you were like trying to motivate, anybody. Like, you want to get to know them and what makes them tick, and, how can I, tap into that and make more of a connection.
Hmm.
But like you could do that for yourself now, like using these bots and like, hey, recontextualize this problem that I have to solve in a fun way.
Oh, totally. And for anyone who's wondering what Lucas is talking about, we'll put a link to our Star Wars GPT in the chat. But it was inspired by Lucas, and it's a just a little bot that you can talk to, and it'll elicit your project management requirements as if you're talking about a Star Wars adventure, and then it will spit it out in business speak for your workforce to consume. Um, but yeah, no, I think putting a little fun into the workforce is definitely needed. When you've got all this tech chaos and alerts and emails and something to kind of bring some grounding into the work you're doing and the products you're creating, I think is definitely needed.
Hmm. Yeah, and just adding some, pull and like something that's actually gonna get me to want to touch the tech tools, and instead of just, oh, I need to get the job done, but no, there's like an inherent reason that I'm feeling like, oh, I want to interact in this space at this point just because it's attractive.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of getting agile on steroids too, where the iterations are just happening so much more quickly. So talk a little bit about what a classic sprint would have looked like a year ago and what that's looking like on the development projects we're working on today.
Um, yeah, so I guess just on like the most obvious level, like either the sprints can be a lot quicker where like, it might have been like the quickest that you want to go is 2 weeks in the past, and in my experience that was pretty common to do 2 week sprints. But also like the breadth and depth of the things that you can accomplish in whatever time period that you choose. So like it might have been that like we have this one component that like it's like the user registration form, and it might not even be like completely done in one sprint, but like just like the user interface, and then we'll add like the database interaction, and then we'll test it against users, and so the idea of like breaking things into very small pieces for sprints. And then what I'm noticing now is like that in the past, we weren't that concerned with like, let's have like a philosophy or like an overall like narrative or idea of like what the sprint is going to entail. And I think some of the best teams do this, and they have done this in the past, but it wasn't always so necessary. But I would say now it's like accelerating everything, where it's like I'm not talking about one form, but I might be talking about entire pages, or we've mocked up like 5 pages like before the project even started on just like the prototype stage, and
Mm-hmm.
looking at all of the interfaces across the board in one sprint, or like just think bigger in less time. So
Yeah,
then like going back to that, like what's the sprint goal, that becomes really important, because you're thinking like, what do we want to learn from this sprint? Like where are we going to be at the end of this? Like if you don't think about that, then we just built like 20 pages that don't have like a specific like purpose that actually going to end up in the final product.
yeah, for sure. I'm hearing a lot of what questions, and that kind of brings me to our style at Flatter of having a coaching culture. All of our supervisors have been through a coach education program. You're a coach, I'm a coach. How do you think that influences your leadership in tech?
Um, yeah, I mean, thinking about, I think, yeah, we kind of mentioned it before, but like the person on the other side, like what motivates people, like why are we doing this? Like, I've been thinking a lot more about like, okay, like we have to create code and we're going to automate it, but it should still be like, delightful to open the project, and like, oh, everything's before me in an organized way. Um, like we are real people like interacting with these things every day, and like that
Mm-hmm.
should be a priority. Just like the stakeholder at the other end, like the user is a priority. Like we're gonna kind of build something miserable if we're a miserable team, I think.
For sure,
Uh,
yeah.
like, cookies are made with love kind of thing, but from
And
a
I,
practical way.
And I like to feel that our customers appreciate that too. And just working for the federal government, I mean, one of the metrics that they really care about is retention. And I think they also understand that you have to incentivize software developers and cybersecurity folks and technologists. You have to incentivize them in a different way. They want to feel engaged. They want to feel included. They want a little bit of time to fiddle with their curiosities and their own passions, and they want to learn, right? So I see all of this as just mutually beneficial if we invest in learning and empower our developers with AI tools, and maybe make our end of it that we have power over and control a little bit fun, that like you said, we're going to get better engagement and better outcomes, and then enjoy your workday a little bit more.
Yeah. And like just also like on the coaching culture, like what is the realm of the possible? Like should we build like a web application, or should we build like a custom chatbot that can do the same thing? Or, um, just not trying to get boxed into like, oh, we've done this in the past, so we need to do it exactly the same way next time.
Hmm. Yeah, and one of the big things that's kind of taken GovCon by storm this year has been AI written proposals. And I didn't think about it until you were talking just now, but it's almost as if we're programming a proposal, right? And not proposal developers don't necessarily have these skills to think about requirements generation with regard to technology. We can write requirements, but you're kind of coding the software to get the right output that you want. And that storyboarding and that arc you were talking about of what do we want to accomplish, it's pretty analogous to what we've done on our AI work on the proposal development side of how do I want the reader to feel? What do I want them to understand? What are their priorities? What's the story we're trying to tell? And you've got to tell your AI all of those things if you have any hope of getting a compelling proposal out the other side that says what you want it to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, we can get really nerdy like we do at the office sometimes, and we're joking about like, speaking to another person is like a form of like data transmission, data compression. I forget who, it might have been like one of these like Joe Rogan guests or something, but talking about like not to be, I mean, it might have been even like Elon talking about data compression with like speaking and communicating, but it's like it makes sense. Like, how are we going to communicate like, why are we better than the alternative? Why are we better than our competitors? Um, Whether we're like trying to put it in the fewest words possible or like insert the most emotion possible or whatever we decide, you kind of have to like actually consider that like the artistry of it at this point because the grammar is kind of figured out by, the tool.
Oh yeah, I keep saying the bar, it's being raised, right? The bar for a mobile app, the bar for a proposal, the bar for a logo, the bar for what a startup company should look like. I feel like all of those things have just, the bar has been raised and the table stakes are different. And if you're not advancing and you still think the bar is where it was 2 years ago, you're going to be missing the mark.
Yeah, like does it lead us to compete on more opportunities? Does it lead us to, try to get one that's perfect? Like there's all sorts of different ways that you can take the capability and run with it. But yeah, like I think, there's always going to be somebody that's going to use the capability. So that's why like, we're all on board.
Okay, so to recap, what we're working on the coach education app with
Hmm.
voice to voice engagement and then student feedback. So that's one tool we're working on. We're transforming the headquarters in lots of different ways, but particularly in business development and proposal development using AI tools. And I'm missing one. What's the third thing we're building?
Um, I guess like the custom bots, which that's kind of the proposal stuff. Maybe like the searching for new opportunities using AI.
Right, the top of the funnel with BD.
Mm.
So we're kind of going all in on technology and really kind of curious what other people are doing, what's working for other companies, and what else? What's our ask from our listeners, Lucas?
Um, yeah, I guess the theme that I've been kind of coalescing around for the past couple weeks is like what does your job look like now? If you're a junior developer, you're probably more concerned with things that were traditionally like senior developer tasks. If you're a 2D graphic artist, maybe you're looking at animation. Like, what are you looking at now doing that you weren't capable of before, aided by the tool? Um, I had this quote from AI that said, and this was like when I was putting together my notes, speed without structure leads to noise. Speed with clarity becomes a superpower. So like we have the speed either way. Are we going to like, have clear ideas and clear like goals, or are we gonna just like add noise to everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we don't want to do. And I think that's potentially the Achilles heel of any development project, right? You're just developing the wrong thing. And that's where we don't want to be. So that's why I think we'll always have lots of emphasis on the first part of the project, the planning phase, the requirements phase, the business process phase. That is the stuff that gets you to an amazing tool. Don't forget the human, right? I guess that's where we'll close it. So thanks so much for listening.